and welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice-weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. 6 years, 400-plus episodes every Tuesday and Friday. I am privileged to sit in this studio and highlight, interview some of the world's most amazing thought leaders, academics, researchers, creators, artists, people who have built something, inspired someone else to do something. Sometimes they may or may not be a renowned thought leader or entrepreneur or intrapreneur. Sometimes they are people that aren't a household name, and maybe they have done something or survived or recovered from something and have shown the courage and stamina, vulnerability to share about it, to help all of us become better leaders, formal or informal, whatever it is you are seeking to achieve in your life. Franklin Covey, of course, the world's most trusted leadership firm whose mission is to inspire greatness in people and organizations everywhere. Today we have a repeat guest who has come at my invitation. I refer to him as kind of the Jiminy Cricket of the world. Not a day or week goes by that I'm not in a meeting with a client or a colleague where I say, well, if Seth heard that, here's what he would say, or here's what Seth would push back on that. I'm probably misquoting him, but I've read, I think, every book he's ever published and have been privileged to have interviewed him several times. His name, of course, is Seth Godin. He's a self-described iconoclast. He's an advisor, a coach. He has educated thousands of people informally and formally, and his new book is titled, This is Strategy, Make Better Plans. Seth Godin, welcome back to On Leadership.
What a treat. You're always so kind. And for those who are just listening, Scott is surrounded by some of the greatest books of our era. I know some of the authors. The way you show up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in a row, it's really generous. So thank you for doing it.
Well, I appreciate that, Seth. You and I have had the privilege, I've had the privilege of having met with you in person 3 or 4 times. You graciously have hosted me at your office in New York, and you've been here in Utah with the Franklin Covey Company. I have learned more from you than any of the 450 thought leaders that I have featured on this podcast. I continue to use you as my personal Jiminy Cricket. When I'm getting ready to send an email out to someone who hasn't subscribed, I step back and think, what would Seth say about this? When I think about giving up, I say, what would Seth think about this? And so you've had a profound impact on my career, including the idea around, smallest viable market versus total addressable market. You mentioned previously you are an iconoclast. Your new book is called This is Strategy. And so I want to start first and talk about, Seth, we so often hear in conversation, well, let's think about this strategically, or let's be a strategic thinker. When would you not think that way, right? Who would admit to being a tactical thinker? Maybe level set and talk about why did you focus this next book on strategy?
I don't know very many strategic thinkers. I don't think there's anything shameful about being a tactical thinker. That's what we were indoctrinated to do. We were pushed from an early age to do our job, to get an A, to get the answers, and for someone to tell us what to do. And when we're engaging in something we haven't done before, we want someone to teach us the tactics. So I thought in this moment of change, it was important that we take a deep breath and understand what strategy even is. Strategy is a philosophy of becoming. Strategy is not a promise and it is not a map. It is instead the arc. Because it doesn't matter how fast you're going. If you're going in the wrong direction, you're not going to get there.
Beautifully said. Seth, indulge me. We're going to jump into the book here in just a moment, but I want to have you rewind a little bit. Last week, I had the privilege of interviewing Malcolm Gladwell, also the second time on the podcast for the new book coming out. I think it's called Revenge at the Tipping Point. It's a whole
yes,
new...
it's a really good book.
Beautiful book, and a whole new book, right? Not a rewritten book. But he said something profound that I can't get out of my mind. And he said it was actually his publication of Blink 4 years after the publication of Tipping Point that actually set Tipping Point on fire, so to speak. 4 years of slogging and podcasting and speaking and promoting, that it took 4 years for what he's mostly known for, I think, Tipping Point, to actually catch fire through the publication of Blink, his second book. Of course, Malcolm came to the table with a long history of writing in the New Yorker and other magazines. Would you do me a favor? Would you rewind a few decades? Because when you think of Seth Godin, you think of this, influential abundant, courageous, iconoclast. But the fact of the matter is, you started in a way most people don't even remember. In fact, I think it involved like a gaming magazine. Would you just indulge all of our future entrepreneurs and leaders? Where did Seth Godin start, and how did you build, to use my words, the influence that you have earned through people trusting you today?
Well, I'm going to start in the middle because you brought up Malcolm. Malcolm changed my life. He may have saved my life. I had written a book called Permission Marketing, and it was important to me and to the world. And then things happened in my professional life, in my personal life, and I was really at a standstill. And I was sitting in a 3,000 square foot office every day by myself. The water was dripping through the roof, and I was stuck. I was fully stuck. And in the mail came a galley of The Tipping Point that his publisher sent me a note saying, would you write a blurb for this? And I read the book in one sitting. I wrote him a blurb. And then I sat down, and in 11 days, I wrote a book called Unleashing the Idea Virus, which obviously I had been thinking about and percolating about without knowing it, because you can't write an original book in 11 days. And I sent it to Malcolm, and I said, I might have stolen ideas from you. I hope I did not. Would you write this? And if you are inclined, write the foreword for it. And he graciously did. And that kickstarted me back into the work I was able to do. So I will always be grateful for his grace and generosity. But how did I end up sitting in that office in the first place? I worked at a software company when I was 23 years old. It was the best job I ever had because it was the only job I ever had. And I left there to become a book packager. Book packagers think of ideas, send them to book publishers, and if they like them, they buy them. And on the first day, Chip Conley and I sold our first book, 1986, for $5,000 to Warner Books. I got half, so $2,500. I said to myself, if I can do this every 2 weeks, I can make a living. And then I got 800 rejection letters in a row. Over the course of the next year, 800 times, someone in book publishing cared enough to buy a stamp, put it on an envelope, and mail me a letter saying no. And I started to learn about strategy after that. And that's what got me out of that hole. When I started my blog, 20 years into it now, the first week I had 10 readers. Every blog has 10 readers at the beginning. Your podcast, your legendary podcast, had the boost of launching with Franklin Covey, but even your podcast didn't have the listenership it has now. That things grow over time. We plant seeds in the right place, we nurture them in the right way, and if we've made good strategic decisions, they grow.
Seth, I don't want to belabor this, but I think this is an important point, right? I don't think there's anything such as overnight success. There's overnight fame. It's often ill-gotten and fleeting. But would you just double down on this for all of the people who are looking to do something abundant and generous and influential in order to make a living? Just remind everybody how important the reps are, and maybe anything listen, as you have said, you can go super fast in the wrong direction and never get to where you want to go. Is there any wisdom you would give anybody and everybody who's looking to learn from your lessons? Tease out one or two best practices, if you will, principles.
Well, the first one is that generosity doesn't mean free, and generous doesn't mean you're the cheapest or racing to the bottom. Generous means you're doing emotional labor, showing up in ways that you don't feel like, to keep a promise to people you've made a promise to. And the second thing I would mention is it's easy to be busy. It's easy to sign up for someone else's tactics, but you have to be very clear about who it's for and what it's for. If you're spending hours every day grooming your social media accounts, you're basically unpaid labor for social media billionaires. They're not there for you, so you don't need to be there for them. And we need to be very clear about the people we seek to serve and the change we seek to make.
21 bestsellers. Your current book is called This is Strategy. 297 connected but disparate but organized thoughts around strategy. There is a theme, 4 threads that you refer to: time, games, empathy, and systems. I'm going to dive deep into 6 or so of these ideas, but would you just talk about time, games, empathy, and systems?
Okay, so we talked about time, planting the seeds, sticking with your podcast even when you only have 10 listeners. Empathy means you have to acknowledge that other people have agency. You are not in charge of what everyone does or what they believe or how they act. If you show up with what you do, with your leadership, and other people aren't interested in following you, they will not follow you. Empathy surrenders our authority, takes responsibility, and then opens the door for people to participate, for people to enroll. The other two are games and systems. Systems are often invisible. They're incredibly powerful. So the solar system keeps the Earth rotating around the sun, not because it wants to, but because of gravity. The wedding industrial complex keeps increasing the cost of a wedding, even though weddings aren't making people any happier. The college industrial complex puts people hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. The credit card system is organized not on behalf of the person who's using a credit card. When we see these invisible systems, we can leverage them and work with them as we seek to change them. And the last one are games. Games aren't Monopoly and Scrabble. Games is a way of thinking, to realize there are players, there are moves, there are rules, there are outcomes. And it keeps us from taking ourselves a little too seriously. Because if you make a move that doesn't work, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you made a move that didn't work. And we don't have to stick with moves that are ineffective just because we made them. In fact, we can eagerly say, oh, I just learned something, and make a different move instead.
Seth, this is precious time with you today. I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to get into the 6 areas of the book that I think I loved the most. I read all 297 of your entries. When you and I first met, gosh, I don't know, 15 years ago, you graciously invited myself and a colleague, Todd Davis, to your office. And when you made us lunch, actually. I remember what the lunch was. It was a stir fry. You made us lunch at your office. And I asked you, I said, Seth, I asked you a kooky question. I said, Seth, what is your SIC code? Kind of an outdated term, your standard industry code. You looked at me like I was a little bit off, but with a twinkle in your eye, you said, good question. And you said, I remember where you were standing, you said, I think it's leadership, which was interesting because you were most well known for marketing and business and strategy. There's so much happening in the world of leadership right now with multiple generations in the workplace and hybrid and post-COVID. And last week, Amazon made the big declaration around everyone back in. Is there a principle or two that you might remind, inspire, ignite in the millions of leaders, formal leaders that are watching and listening today of how they need to lead, go forward in our new world that's evolving daily?
The biggest one for sure is that leadership and management are different things. So I don't know how many people work at Amazon, maybe 100,000, but they don't have more than a few dozen leaders. And most people there are managers, telling other people what to do with a stopwatch and a manual. And that's one reason why they need everyone in the office, so they can watch them. And there's nothing wrong with management. It keeps things moving. But leadership is different. Leadership is voluntary. Leadership leans into the liminal space and explores the things that might not work. So you don't have to be a leader, but if you're going to be a leader, that's what you've signed up for. The discomfort of this might not work. So that's the first one. And then the second one is much more tactical, which is there are only 2 valid strategies, race to the bottom or race to the top. If you're racing to the bottom, your slogan is you can pick anyone and we're anyone. That we're going to build a company that is going to win by hustling to be cheaper and to be more convenient. Or your slogan could be, you'll pay a lot, but you get more than you paid for. And that mantra is hard to earn. But if you earn that mantra, an enormous amount of freedom comes with it.
Seth, let's get into the book. Number 96. Again, I think there was 297 of these thoughts that you opine on. Number 96, what does it mean to be a strategic thinker? We talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but will you paint that picture, that archetype, if you will, as someone wants to be anointed, to earn the right to be referred to as a strategic thinker? What does that look like, sound like, feel like to those they're working with?
You know, the future is an unvisited city, but we can see it from a distance. And part of what we're doing when we do strategy is we're making decisions. We are making assertions. We are imagining where the seeds should be planted and what will happen over time. Strategies are easy to describe and hard to stick with. Strategies rarely come from a committee. That what we're looking for from someone with a strategy is for you to articulate who's it for, what's the change we're seeking to make, where's my smallest viable audience. If I do this, then that will happen, and if I do this, then that will happen. And if it doesn't, then this will happen. If we can articulate those things, it won't take very long. It will be frightening, but it will alert us to the fact that tomorrow is not going to be just like today.
I'm going to skip around a bit and go back to 57. Passion and our business model. I'm going to pitch you a phrase that you wrote in the book as it struck me as kind of profound and again, a little bit counterintuitive. Number 57, passion and our business model. Pundits tell us to do what we're passionate about and the work will take care of itself. This is a brittle strategy. Some people get paid for their hobbies, but not many. The alternative is to decide to be passionate about what you do. I love this thought because we hear from so many successful people, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And that's about 0.000% of most people. Expand on that, if you will.
Well, you know, authenticity is for friendships and consistency is for professionals. What the audience you're serving is looking for is for you to be the best version of yourself when they engage with you. If you choose to adopt the attitude that I'm not going to get today over again, so I might as well act like this is exactly what I would be doing, you'll have a better day and your customers will benefit. It's worth remembering that every person listening to this is far wealthier and far healthier than the last king of France was, that we're royalty. We have all of these magical tools. And if your job is untenable, then you should quit. But if you are engaging with other people and making a change you can be proud of, you can act like that's your passion and it will become your passion. And when you are consistent in that way, what you will discover is the days get better.
Seth, perhaps I've taken some permission, but I have on many occasions referred to you as my friend. And people
I think that's fair.
Well, thank you, sir. And that's nice of you. And many people ask me, so what is Seth Godin like? And I always use the same word. I say clear. He's very clear. On a number of occasions, I've brought Seth some speaking opportunity or perhaps some collaboration, and it usually goes one of three ways. No, but thank you. And it's a very short, curt conversation, gracious, but short. Or it might be yes, because it was a very small ask and he felt, or, so it's either yes or no. Occasionally it might be tell me more. And the reason I'm mentioning this, because I know in the words of Brene Brown, right, clear is kind. You are one of the most clear humans I've ever encountered. I'm guessing it's because you're clear on your values, your mission, your priorities. Number 109 is titled The Urgency of No. And I think this is a defining separation of probably clarity on values, self-confidence, prioritization. Talk about the urgency of no, and how do leaders build this discipline?
Well, I hope I'm never curt, because I think curt means that you are deliberately trying to send a message to the other person. I am trying to be kind and direct and clear. If I say yes to something, whether I like it or not, I have to say no to something else. And so do you. So does everyone. You can't have 4 different things for lunch, because after you've had one, lunch is over. Saying yes to the curry means saying no to the tofu. You can't have both. So when we think about that and the service we are trying to perform, the clarity about this of not giving other people control over us just because of when they showed up is essential if you're going to build a strategy. So if you invite me to your wedding and I have to travel across the world and spend 3 days to come, that costs too much. So I can say, I love you, thank you very much, I won't be able to come. It only takes 10 seconds of discomfort to say that, compared to the 3 days of discomfort it would take to apologize to all the people I'm not going to be with and be miserable for 3 days.
Was that a discipline you've always had? Did you learn that through a mentor, a coach? Because it's like Dr. Covey would say, says easy, does hard, right? How did you build the courage to disappoint people, but at the service of your own finite time in the world?
No one's ever asked me that before. I'm going to say it's because I was unpopular in high school. And that could have led to one of two options. Either I would seek to become popular by pleasing whoever I was with at any time, or I would be comfortable with being momentarily unpopular in service of the longer game. And thanks to the wonderful household I grew up in, I picked the second one.
I'm going to move on. 159. It's called Grabbing the Last Donut. You teach a valuable strategy lesson in the juxtaposition, if you will, of Amazon and Walmart. Take that wherever you'd like to go, because most people can't relate to their enterprises being like Amazon and Walmart. You teach some great lessons in here, regardless of the size and scale of an entrepreneur.
All right, so I don't think many people here can visualize what the world was like 24 years ago. 24 years ago, a lot of people still had modems and were calling into AOL. 24 years ago, there was no social media whatsoever, and the smartphone didn't exist. Amazon had just gone through some real struggles. People said they were going to go bankrupt, but they were over the hump. Walmart hired me to give a speech. I flew to Bentonville, Arkansas, and there were 200 people in the room. And as I walked into their auditorium for their entire digital group, there was a giant banner on the wall. And the banner said, "You can't out Amazon Amazon." 24 years ago, they gave up. 24 years ago, they said, we see the strategy that Amazon is pursuing, and we know what it would cost us to compete with them, what the distraction would be, what the financial cost would be, how it would undermine our stores. So we're going to play our own game, and we're walking away from that donut. And if you add up the profits of 24 years, it wasn't a bad short-term strategy. Now they have to hustle as retail continues to change. But that choice, the biggest retailer in the world, gave up in the year 2000, that was extraordinary.
Seth, how do you hope people digest this book? It's a very deliberate teasing together of episodic ideas and thoughts. I mean, I got 7 into them and thought, okay, I need to stop, because any one of these could change the way I invest my time, I lead my people. How do you want people to benefit from this book?
Well, you might notice there are no page numbers.
Frustrating.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not frustrating, because half the people who engage with my books do it digitally by audio or Kindle, and those don't have page numbers. So I gave people numbers to talk about each one of the riffs. Why? Because if you digest the book by yourself, it's not going to help very much. But if you talk about it with other people, it's transformative. So the purpose of the book, the reason I didn't just write a blog post, is I want to challenge people to have a conversation. It's when 2 people talk about it that the magic happens. I'll just get credit for it, but I didn't do it. You did it. By sharing with someone, oh, 179, how does that affect us? And I've seen this in real life. I run an online community called purple.space, and I made this into 45 videos, which I shared with the people there. And I got to watch them talking about the videos. And they will all tell you they learn more from talking to each other than from the videos. And I wrote a better book, because as I saw them talking about it, I could rewrite the chapters of the book.
197, you title, May I See the Org Chart? This was one of my favorite, top 2, because it's such a prevalent issue inside organizations in terms of understanding Well, I'll let you tell the story because I thought I've been in this at my entire career, sales and marketing, business development, relationship development, and I loved how you wrote about the story. Tell the story and expand on it, if you will.
Yeah, it was 30 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. And I had a similar interaction with you, but I'm going to tell it about IBM instead. I was talking to IBM about our online marketing. We invented email marketing all those years ago. And the woman at IBM, a VP, really liked our idea. And she said, hand me your pad. And she took out a pen and she drew the org chart of her division. And she put names in all the boxes. And she said, you got to get this guy on board. Don't bother meeting with this person. He's going to waste your time. These 3 people will be in the meeting, but they don't have any. And she told me how the organization was built and what would be needed to sell something to them. And when people hear this, they're shocked because it's supposed to be a secret. Why is it supposed to be a secret? It's the division's job to do good stuff. And if you're going to make salespeople guess and waste their time, who's benefiting from that? And so, when you and I have talked about different places, you said, yeah, over here, but not over here. And being a guide to someone who is working with you to help a change happen is exactly what you need to do, what the company needs to do, what the person you're working with needs to do. But we got all hung up on this false competitive thing that it's a secret. If you're not willing to show me the org chart, don't waste my time. I got other things to do.
Seth, indulge me. I'm going to do a quick speed round with you because this is precious time for our listeners. When you look at the totality of everybody you've worked with in organizations, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs around the world, regardless of how someone defines success, financially, mission-driven, whatever, what do the most successful people have in common?
I would say they understand what success is. And that thing that they think of as success is coherent with who they really want to become. That almost all the billionaires I know are fundamentally unhappy. And they're unhappy because they think their job is to make more money, which is absurd. And to be truly successful, you should be clear about what it is you're trying to obtain and be congruent in your actions to help that happen.
You could riff on this for hours. What do most marketers get wrong? Good people, educated. What do you like? When you think about, the traditional marketer who's maybe in their 30s and they've got an undergraduate degree and they're a product line manager or they're in a system or a culture that may or may not be rightly aligned with a strategy or no strategy. For the millions of marketers who are leaning in right now, everybody's in marketing, everybody's in sales, part the C's.
Most marketers are selfish, short-term narcissists who want to try to get the word out, who think that marketing is hype and hustle, who are under pressure from the system, because they're not bad people. They're under pressure from the system to make the weekly numbers, or to get the clicks, or to get the likes or the follows, and as a result, they sabotage their work. That what it is to do great marketing is to build and tell a true story that other people want to share. That's not easy, but it's simple. Is the thing you're building something that the right folks would miss if it were gone, and they are eager to tell the others? Build that, and the thing you think of as marketing takes care of itself.
What's the biggest lesson you learned the hard way?
Oh. There are so many. How about shortcuts aren't?
Amen. Shortcuts aren't. I love it. I love it. Seth, I have a privilege in about an hour to interview Sal Khan, of course, the founder of the Khan Academy. He's written a new book about AI in education. He's been on the podcast before.
I've read it. It's really good.
It's a lovely, I know I was riveted in his book coming out shortly. So much obsession and hype on AI right now and the efficiencies and productivities and what it means for the global order of the world and the future of employment and even spiritual cosmic implications on the viability of humanity. It's interesting, I interviewed someone yesterday who thought that AI was overhyped. To the extent you have an opinion and a crystal ball, which is absurd, but you're a skip thinker and you are certainly a futurist. tied with being a teacher. Is there anything you would like everyone, especially perhaps the leaders that are responsible for strategy in their organization? Some of us are responsible for tactics and executing as we earn our way. Is there something you'd like to challenge our thinking on or remind us around where you see AI landing that we should be prepared for creating strategies for?
Okay, so a couple credentials. In 1983, I studied a PhD AI with Doug Lynott at Stanford, and then I worked with Arthur C. Clarke, the inventor of HAL, in 2001. So I've been thinking about AI for a very long time. AI is the biggest shift in our world since electricity. Businesses that say we're not going to deal with it are like businesses that said we're not going to use electricity. On the other hand, AI is a trick. It's all in our heads. It's just doing math. It doesn't actually know anything. When I add all that together, I would say the following. If you're viewing AI as a way to cost reduce and depersonalize what you do, to dump customers into an AI system, to try to use AI to replace people, you're racing to the bottom. Someone's going to do that more than you. On the other hand, if you're using AI to repersonalize, to create enough value that you can hire more people, that you can offer people dignity and respect and connection, that you can come up with things that are not just simply convenient or cheap, AI is a spectacular tool. And the last part of it is either you're going to put AI to work for you or you're going to be working for an AI.
Seth, as we conclude, would you remind all of our listeners and viewers about your blog? You have done something that I don't know that any human in mankind has done in terms of consistency, perseverance. Talk about your blog. Would you, and would you just indulge me? Remind us how often, with what frequency, with what level of interruption, because there's so many great lessons to be learned about your blog, not to mention the content of your blog. Talk about the what, the why, the how, and the frequency.
Well, the good news is if you have a daily streak and you keep it going, no one will ever catch up. Seth's blog has had to post every single day for many, many, many years. I have 9,000 posts in a row. And I made the decision 20 years ago that there was going to be a post every day. So tomorrow there will be a post, not because it's the best post I ever wrote, but because it's Friday. That decision informs my days. Because if it's Thursday, I'm spending the day thinking about what am I going to add to the queue, because tomorrow's Friday. And that causes me to notice things. It causes me to be more conscious of my words, my attention, how I'm teaching. It lets me off the hook in terms of saying, I don't have to have a debate with myself. Is this good enough to blog? There's going to be a blog. It's just, is this the best one I got right now? And when I add those things up, I'm super glad I resisted the temptation of social media, because that would have undermined the posture I'm trying to take, not amplify it. So I don't look at my statistics. I have no idea what the click-through rate is. That's not what I'm trying to maximize. All I'm trying to do is write something that Scott thinks is good enough to forward to his friends.
And that has happened numerous thousands of times. You describe yourself as a teacher. I would also add that you are a futurist, which means you're working on something that I should be interested in. Although your current book out is This Is Strategy, and no doubt it'll become your 22nd bestseller, could you just share with us a glimpse about what is Seth Godin thinking about that might come out a year or two from now? It'd be a course, be a thought, a blog, a book, because that's a topic I want to get interested in, because if you're working on it, that means it's going to be relevant. So I'm not looking for stock tips. I'm looking for what's next in Seth's head.
Here's a useful lesson. The answer I'm about to give you is true, and we don't say it often enough. I have no idea.
Seth Godin, your current book is called This Is Marketing, Make Better Plans, 297 entries, any one of which could be conversation for a team meeting, a huddle, impact on strategy and leadership. Such an honor that you would come back and invest 35 minutes with us again today. You said no to something today to say yes to this. Seth, send us off. I use you as an example almost every day of the week. I happen to own a literary talent and speaking agency. And whenever someone comes to me who's launching a book, and I talk about what their plans are, and they say, well, I'm not sure. I launched my book, 4 months ago. And I say, well, how many podcasts did you do? And they say, well, I did 4. And I say, well, Seth did 140. And so if Seth Godin can do 140 or 80, then you can as well too. Remind everybody, fast isn't always right, but you put in the reps. I mean, for everything you do, you don't just float it there and think that your brand is going to lift it. Remind everybody of the value of not just hard work, but the right work.
I don't think of a podcast with Scott Miller as something I have to do. I think of it as something I get to do. And the minute that isn't true, I'm going to stop doing it. That I'm a teacher, and you loaning me your platform for a little bit is something that I don't take lightly. The reps at the gym, the people who are good at the gym don't view them as a chore. They view them as the point. And that's one reason why I'm not good at the gym, because I view that part as a chore. But this is a treat and a privilege and an opportunity. And when I think about my ancestors, when I think about friends I have around the world, not one day goes by without me being grateful for the fact that I have this privilege and this chance. So yeah, you got to show up, but don't show up because you want to get something. Show up because showing up is part of the deal.
One of my key heroes in life is former President George H.W. Bush, a man of, in my opinion, unimpeachable character. And he had a hokey phrase at the end of his administration. We talked about 1,000 points of light. And sir, I think you are like the manifestation of a point of light, what you inspire, what you generate. You're so deliberate in what you talk about and the words you choose. I have learned so much from you. Thank you for your friendship, and thank you for coming on today. Seth Godin, your new book is This Is Strategy. Everyone that listens to this podcast will be buying this book. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Scott. Keep making this ruckus. We need you.
Thank you, sir. And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.